The house didn't just have a smell, it had a heartbeat. If you stood perfectly still in the center of the living room, right where the late afternoon sun hit the Persian rug Arthur and I bought in '85, you could feel it. It was a low, steady rhythm composed of the refrigerator's hum, the settling of the cedar beams in the attic, and the rhythmic asterisk tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the foyer. For 40 years, this rhythm had been the soundtrack of my life. My name is Rowena Sterling. I am 64 years old, and until recently, I believed I was the queen of a peaceful kingdom. This house, a 2-story craftsman on a street lined with ancient oak trees, was my sanctuary. It was my history written in wood and plaster. Every scuff on the baseboards told a story. The scratch near the back door was from when Preston, my son, tried to bring his first bicycle inside during a thunderstorm. The discoloration on the kitchen counter was from the time Arthur tried to make his famous chili and forgot it on the burner while we danced to Motown in the living room. Since Arthur passed 7 years ago, the house had become more than just a structure. It was the vessel that held him. When I walked through the garden we cultivated together, deadheading the hydrangeas or pruning the roses, I felt his hand over mine. When I sat in the kitchen on Sunday mornings, drinking my black coffee, I could almost hear him turning the pages of the newspaper across the table. Solitude didn't scare me, silence didn't bother me, but apparently it bothered my son. "You shouldn't be alone in that big house, Mom," Preston had said, his voice dripping with concern. He held my hands across a cafe table, his eyes, Arthur's eyes, looking at me with a pleading intensity. "Brianna and we want to be there to help, to make sure you're safe." At the time, I thought it was the purest form of filial love. I thought, what a blessing. Most children flee the nest and never look back. My boy wanted to return. So they moved in. Preston, my only son, and Brianna, his wife of 3 years. The first few months were a dream I didn't want to wake up from. It was the honeymoon phase, a term usually reserved for marriages, but it applied perfectly to our new living arrangement. The house, which had been quiet for 7 years, was suddenly filled with life again. We ate dinner together every night at 6:30 sharp. Brianna was attentive, almost aggressively so. She would take the heavy laundry basket from my hands before I could even lift it. "Oh no, Rowena, let me get that. You relax," she would say, her smile bright and polished. She cooked my favorite meals, pot roast with extra carrots, creamy mashed potatoes, apple pie from scratch. Preston was just as wonderful. He spent his weekends fixing things I hadn't even realized were broken. He tightened the hinges on the cabinets, power washed the driveway, and fixed the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. I would watch him from the porch, sweat on his brow, looking so much like his father, and my heart would swell with a pride so fierce it almost hurt. "I'm so lucky," I told my sister Margaret over the phone one evening. "They treat me like a queen in my own home." "Just make sure you don't lose your crown, Ro," Margaret had joked. I laughed it off. I was naive. I was blinded by the comfort of having family close. But about 4 months ago, the atmosphere in the house shifted. It wasn't an explosion, it was a slow leak. It started with the silence. I would walk into a room, the kitchen usually, and the conversation would die instantly. It wasn't a natural pause, it was a guillotine chop. Preston would be leaning against the counter, whispering something urgent to Brianna, and the moment my slippered foot hit the linoleum, they would freeze. Preston would shove his phone into his pocket with a swift, guilty motion. Brianna would turn to the sink, her shoulders tense, and turn the water on too high. "What were you two talking about?" I asked one Tuesday morning, trying to keep my voice light, casual. Brianna turned, drying her hands on a towel. Her smile was there, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was a mechanical lifting of the lips like a reflex. "Nothing important, Rowena, just work gossip, boring stuff." "Work stuff, Mom," Preston echoed, not looking at me. He was staring at his toast as if it contained the secrets of the universe. "Boring." I let it go. Everyone has secrets, right? Maybe they were having marital troubles. Maybe they were planning a surprise for my upcoming birthday. I tried to rationalize the knot forming in my stomach. Then came the physical changes to my sanctuary. The downstairs master bedroom, the room Arthur and I had shared for 35 years, was the heart of the house. After Arthur died, I couldn't bear to sleep there alone. The bed was too big, the empty space on the left side too loud. So I had moved my things to the smaller, cozier guest room upstairs and converted the master suite into a storage space for our old albums, Arthur's collection of vintage cameras, and my winter coats. I rarely went in there, but the door always stood open. It was part of the house's flow. Until one day I found it closed and locked. I jiggled the handle, frowning. "Preston," I called out. He appeared from the living room a little too quickly. "Yeah, Mom, what's up?" "The door to the old master suite. It's stuck." "Oh, right." He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous tic he'd had since he was a teenager. "We locked it. Brianna noticed some moisture on the walls in there. A bit of mold, maybe. We're running a dehumidifier and we didn't want the spores to spread to the rest of the house. Didn't want you breathing that in." "Moisture?" I frowned. "We've never had moisture problems in that room. The foundation is solid." "Well, pipes get old, Mom," he said, his voice taking on a slightly patronizing edge. "Just let us handle it. We don't want your things getting ruined." I didn't remember giving them permission to seal off a wing of my house. I didn't remember seeing any mold, but looking at my son's concerned face, I forced myself to nod. "Okay, thank you for taking care of it." But the doubt had taken root. It grew in the dark, fed by the strange occurrences that followed. I began to hear things. My hearing is excellent for my age. At night, when the house should have been settling into its slumber, I heard the floorboards singing. Footsteps. Not the heavy thud of Preston's gait, nor the quick, sharp click of Brianna's heels. These were unfamiliar rhythms. Shuffling, hesitant steps. And voices, muffled low, coming from downstairs. One night I sat up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. I heard a laugh, a man's laugh. It was throaty and unfamiliar. It definitely wasn't Preston. "Am I going crazy?" I whispered to the empty dark of my room. "Is this what senility feels like?" But the true fracture, the moment the glass of my reality finally shattered, happened 3 nights ago. It was just before midnight. The house was supposed to be asleep. I had gotten up to get a glass of water, my throat parched. I walked softly down the stairs, knowing exactly which steps creaked and avoiding them out of habit. From the landing of the staircase, I had a direct view of the front entryway. The porch light was off, but the street lamp outside cast a pale, sickly glow through the transom window. I saw Brianna standing at the front door. She wasn't wearing her pajamas. She was dressed in jeans and a nice blouse, her hair brushed. She opened the front door. A young woman stood there. She looked travel-worn, pulling a small, rolling suitcase behind her. She looked around nervously at the quiet street before stepping onto the doormat. I pressed myself against the wall, holding my breath. My heart felt like a trapped bird in my chest. Who is this? Why is a stranger coming into my house at midnight? They didn't hug. This wasn't a friend. The young woman reached into her jacket and pulled out a small envelope. She handed it to Brianna. Brianna didn't hesitate. She opened the envelope, pulled out a stack of cash, green bills, distinct even in the dim light, and thumbed through them with a practiced speed. 1, 2, 3. She nodded, satisfied, and shoved the money into her back pocket. Then she stepped aside and gestured for the woman to enter. "Quietly, please," I heard Brianna whisper. Her voice wasn't warm, it was businesslike. "Shoes off by the mat." The woman nodded, kicked off her sneakers, and rolled her suitcase inside. Brianna led her not to the living room, but down the hallway, straight toward the locked master bedroom. I heard the click of a key turning. The door opened. A spill of yellow incandescent light flooded the hallway for a brief second before the door clicked shut again. I stood there on the stairs, frozen. My mind was racing, trying to find a logical explanation that didn't involve betrayal. A friend in trouble, a charity case. But you don't take cash from charity cases, and you don't count the money before letting a friend inside. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of a stranger breathing my air, sleeping under my roof. The next morning, the kitchen smelled of coffee and bacon, just like always. It was a grotesque pantomime of normalcy. Did you sleep well, Mom? Preston asked, scrolling through news on his tablet. He didn't look up. Very well, I lied. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. And you? Hear anything strange last night? Brianna froze mid-pour with the coffee pot, just for a microsecond. Strange, like what? Oh, just wind maybe, or footsteps. Old houses make noises, Rowena, Brianna said, her smile flashing like a warning sign. Probably just the pipes settling. Coffee. Like Bobby's, Preston added. We slept like Bobby's. Liars, the word screamed in my head. Both of you are liars. I needed to scream. I needed to flip the table and demand to know who was in the master bedroom. But a cold, sharp instinct stopped me. If I confronted them now, they would lie. They would say I was confused. They would say it was a cousin visiting. They would gaslight me until I doubted my own eyes. I needed concrete proof. I needed to know exactly what was happening in my sanctuary. That afternoon, fate handed me the final piece of the puzzle. Brianna went to the grocery store. Preston was at his office. The house was empty, or so they thought. I stood before the door of the old master bedroom. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my key ring. I had the master key, the skeleton key that opened every interior door in this house. Arthur had kept it on a brass ring, and I had carried it since the day he died. Moisture problem, I whispered to myself, trembling with rage. Let's see the moisture. I slid the key into the lock. It didn't fit. I frowned and tried again, wiggling it. It wouldn't go in past the first ridge. The mechanism blocked it. I dropped to my knees and peered into the keyhole. The metal was shiny, new. They hadn't just locked the door. They had changed the entire lock cylinder. They had physically altered my home to keep me out. I sat back on my heels, the cold wood floor pressing against my legs. The rage that washed over me wasn't hot and fiery. It was cold and absolute. It was the clarity of a winter storm. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated invasion. My son and his wife were hiding something behind that door, something that required new locks, cash transactions, and midnight arrivals. I stood up, dusting off my knees. I looked at the closed door one last time. Okay, I said to the empty hallway. You want to play games, let's play. I couldn't fight them like a mother. A mother is soft, a mother forgives. I needed to be something else. I needed to be a strategist. I walked to the kitchen and picked up the landline. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady when I dialed. Margaret, I said when my sister answered. Ro, everything okay? You sound tight. No, everything is not okay, but I have a plan. Listen to me carefully. I need to come visit you, or at least, I need everyone to think I'm coming to visit you. What are you talking about? I'll explain later, just, if Preston calls, you tell him I'm with you. You tell him I'm sick, or I'm tired, or I'm shopping. I don't care, just cover for me. I hung up the phone. I looked out the window at the house across the street. Jasper Finch lived there. He was 72, a widower like me, and the nosiest man in the neighborhood. He spent his days sitting on his porch, watching the world go by. If anyone knew what was happening in my house when I wasn't looking, it was Jasper. I wasn't just Rowena Sterling, the grieving widow, anymore. I was the owner of this estate, and I was about to go to war for it. Jasper Finch has lived at number 42 for as long as I've lived at 43. We are the last two guards of the old neighborhood watch, relics from a time when people actually knew who lived next door. Jasper is 72, a retired mechanical engineer with a penchant for plaid shirts and sweet iced tea. Since his wife, Clara, passed 5 years ago, and my Arthur 2 years before that, we had developed a quiet, unspoken rhythm. I'd bring him extra slices of pumpkin bread. He'd bring in my trash cans when it rained. He knew the rhythm of my life as well as I knew his. Crossing the street that afternoon felt like crossing a border. I wasn't just a neighbor visiting for tea. I was a defector seeking asylum. Jasper opened the door before I could knock. He took one look at my face, pale, tight-lipped, eyes likely wild with lack of sleep, and stepped aside. Iced tea is in the fridge, Rowena, he said gently. Come sit. We sat in his kitchen, a space that smelled of lemon polish and old paper. I wrapped my cold hands around the condensation of the glass and told him everything. The whispers, the changed locks, the midnight visitor with the cash. I expected him to be shocked. I expected him to tell me I was overreacting. Instead, Jasper sighed, a long, heavy sound that seemed to deflate his shoulders. He reached across the table and patted my hand with his trembling, age-spotted fingers. I was wondering when you'd notice, he said quietly. My stomach dropped. You knew. I suspected, Jasper corrected. He took a sip of tea, grimacing slightly. Rowena, I sit on my porch a lot. It's what old men do. And for the last few months, I've seen things. What things, Jasper? Traffic, he said. Taxis pulling up at 10:00 p.m. Private cars dropping people off, always with luggage. Backpacks, rolling suitcases. They go to your door, Brianna lets them in, and I don't see them come out until the next morning. Early, like dawn early. He looked at me with apologetic eyes. I didn't want to say anything. I thought maybe Preston had fell on hard times. Maybe they were renting a room to friends. It wasn't my place to interfere. But when I saw 3 different groups in 1 week. 3, I whispered. Last week, 2 young men on Tuesday, a couple on Thursday, and a single woman on Friday. It's a revolving door, Rowena. My hands shook so hard the ice in my glass rattled. It wasn't just one room. It was a business. My home, my sanctuary, was being run like a cheap roadside motel. I need your help, Jasper, I said, my voice stealing. I need to know exactly what they are doing. I need proof. I told him my plan. I would fake a trip to visit my sister, Margaret, in Boston. I would leave the house entirely in their hands, giving them the freedom they clearly craved. But I wouldn't go to Boston. I would come right back here, to Jasper's spare bedroom upstairs, and watch. Jasper didn't hesitate. The guest room is yours. The window has a perfect view of your front porch and the living room bay window. We'll set up the bird-watching binoculars. A grim smile touched his lips. We'll catch them, Rowena. We'll catch them red-handed. Returning to my house felt like walking onto a stage. I had to be the actress of a lifetime. Dinner that night was meatloaf. The air was thick with the usual tension, the silence punctuated only by the scrape of forks against china. Preston was scrolling on his phone under the table. I could see the glow illuminating his chin. Brianna was pushing peas around her plate. I took a deep breath and dropped the bomb. I have some news, I said brightly. Preston's head snapped up. Brianna stopped chewing. Their eyes were wide, alert. Fear, guilt. I've decided to go visit Margaret in Boston, I announced. She's been begging me to come for months, and honestly, I think I need a change of scenery. I'm leaving tomorrow morning. The reaction was immediate and visceral. It was like watching a pressure valve release. Brianna smiled. It wasn't her usual polite, tight-lipped smile. This was a wide, genuine grin that showed too many teeth. Oh, Rowena, that is a wonderful idea. You deserve a break. Boston is great this time of year, Preston added, nodding vigorously. He put his phone down, actually put it down, and leaned forward. How long will you be gone? About a week, I said. Maybe 10 days if we decide to take a trip up to Maine. Preston and Brianna exchanged a look. It was a micro-expression, lasting less than a second, but I caught it. It was a look of pure, unadulterated relief. Calculations were being made behind their eyes. 10 days, empty house, opportunity. Don't you worry about a thing here, Mom, Preston said, his voice smooth. We'll hold down the fort, water the plants, keep everything tidy. I know you will, I said, taking a bite of meatloaf to hide the disgust curling my lip. I trust you completely. That night, as I packed my suitcase, I felt a strange detachment. I packed my toiletries, my nightgown, my reading glasses. I made a show of it, leaving the suitcase open on the bed so they could see I was really going. But inside, I was screaming. They wanted me gone. My own son, the boy I had nursed through chicken pox and heartbroken teenage nights, couldn't wait to shove me out the door so he could sell my space to strangers. The next morning, the betrayal cut deeper. Preston insisted on driving me to the bus station. "I want to make sure you get off safely," he said. "Make sure I leave," I translated silently. The car ride was excruciating. Preston drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, humming along to the radio. He seemed lighter, happier than he had been in months. "So you have your ticket?" he asked for the third time. "Yes, Preston." "And Margaret is meeting you at the station." "Yes, Preston." When we pulled up to the curb at the terminal, he didn't turn off the engine. He didn't offer to park and walk me to the platform. He got out, popped the trunk, and set my suitcase on the sidewalk. "Well," he said, giving me a quick, one-armed hug. It was stiff, impersonal. "Have a great trip, Mom. Call us when you get there." I looked into his eyes, searching for anything. A flicker of sadness, a hesitation, a "I'll miss you." There was nothing, just a restless energy. He was already checking his watch. He was already mentally back at the house, calculating how much money they could make tonight. "I love you, son," I said, testing him. "Love you too, Mom. Go on, don't miss the bus." He got back in the car and drove away without looking back. I stood on the curb, watching his taillights disappear into traffic. A single tear rolled down my cheek. I wiped it away angrily. That was the last tear I would shed for Preston Sterling today. I waited 20 minutes to be safe. Then, I walked to the taxi stand. "Where to, lady?" the driver asked. I gave him Jasper's address. It was a 10-minute ride back to my own street, but I was returning as a different woman. Jasper was waiting. He had set up the guest room like a command center. There was a comfortable armchair positioned by the window, obscured by sheer lace curtains so we could see out but no one could see in. A pair of heavy-duty binoculars sat on the sill. A notebook and pen were ready on the side table. "Welcome to headquarters," Jasper said grimly. I sat in the chair. It was strange, looking at my house from this angle. From across the street, number 43 looked beautiful. The hydrangeas were in full bloom, blue and purple heads bobbing in the breeze. The porch swing moved gently. It looked like the perfect American home. But now, viewing it from the outside, it felt like enemy territory. It was a fortress I had been locked out of. "Now what?" I asked. "Now," Jasper said, handing me a fresh glass of tea. "We wait." The afternoon passed agonizingly slowly. I saw Brianna leave around 2:00 p.m. and return an hour later with bags, not grocery bags, but large packs of toilet paper and what looked like stacks of white towels. Wholesale supplies. "She's restocking," Jasper noted, writing it down in the notebook. "Preparing for turnover." The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lawn. My house lit up. The porch light flicked on. The living room glowed warm and inviting. Then, at 6:45 p.m., a silver sedan pulled up to the curb. My breath hitched. A young couple got out. They looked like tourists, stylish clothes, consulting a map on a phone. The man went to the trunk and pulled out a large suitcase. The woman had a backpack. They didn't knock. They didn't ring the doorbell. The front door opened before they even reached the steps. Brianna stood there, wearing her best hostess smile, the one she used to save for Thanksgiving guests. "Welcome," I could almost hear her say it through the glass. She ushered them inside. The man paused to admire the stained glass on the door, asterisk my stained glass that Arthur had restored by hand. Then they disappeared inside. My stomach churned violently. It was a visceral, physical reaction, like being punched in the gut. Seeing strangers walk into my home, with my daughter-in-law holding the door wide open, made me feel nauseous. "They're treating it like a hotel," I whispered, my voice trembling. "They are selling my privacy." "Watch," Jasper said softly. 10 minutes later, the lights in the living room dimmed. Then the light in the downstairs master bedroom, the locked room, the moisture problem room flicked on. Through the side window, even through the blinds, I could see the shadows of movement. I saw a silhouette, the stranger walk past the window. He was in Arthur's room. He was likely unpacking his bag on Arthur's bed. I started to stand up. I'm going over there. I'm going to kill them. Jasper's hand landed firmly on my shoulder. No, Rowena, sit down. But they are. If you go over there now, you stop them for one night, Jasper said, his voice stern but kind. They'll make up an excuse. They'll say it's a one-time thing. They'll lie. He pointed to the house. You need to see the whole picture. You need to see how deep this goes. We wait until Friday. Remember what I told you. Friday is the big night. I sank back into the chair, my eyes fixed on the glowing window of the room that used to be my sanctuary. I watched as the stranger's shadow moved across the wall, inhabiting the space where my husband used to sleep. Okay, I said, my voice cold and hard. We wait. I picked up the pen and opened the notebook. Entry 1, 6:45 p.m. Silver sedan, 2 guests. Entry granted by Brianna. Master bedroom occupied. I wasn't just watching anymore. I was building a case. For the next 48 hours, I ceased to be a mother. I became a forensic accountant of my own betrayal. From the vantage point of Jasper's guest room window, the reality of what was happening at 43 Maple Street unfolded with sickening clarity. It wasn't a casual favor for friends. It wasn't a temporary solution to a debt. It was an industry. Brianna was the operations manager. I watched through the binoculars as she moved through the house on Wednesday morning. She was a blur of efficiency I had never seen when she was just helping out with my chores. At 10:00 a.m., the Tuesday night guests, 2 young men with hiking gear, departed. The moment the front door clicked shut behind them, Brianna sprang into action. I watched her through the living room window. She stripped the sofa cushions. She vacuumed the rug with a vigor that bordered on aggressive. Then she disappeared into the hallway. Through the side window of the master bedroom, my husband's room, I saw her stripping the bed. She moved with the practiced speed of a hotel maid. Snap asterisk went the sheet, asterisk tuck went the corners. She emerged 10 minutes later carrying a bundle of dirty linens, heading for the laundry room. She was washing my sheets, using my water, my electricity, and my detergent to sanitize the evidence of strangers sleeping in my home. She's done this before, I murmured, lowering the binoculars. My eyes stung. She has a system, Jasper, look at her. Jasper was sitting at his kitchen table, oiling a small clock gear. He didn't look up. Practice makes perfect, Rowena. Then there was Preston, my son, the chief financial officer. He arrived home from work at 5:30 p.m. sharp. He didn't look tired. He looked hungry. That evening, after the blinds were drawn in the living room, I saw a sliver of light escaping through a gap in the curtains. I adjusted the focus on the binoculars. They were sitting at the dining room table, the mahogany table where we had celebrated Preston's graduation, his wedding, Arthur's retirement. The table was covered in cash. Preston was sorting bills, stacks of 20s, 50s, hundreds. He licked his thumb and counted, his lips moving silently. 1, 2, 3. He banded a stack and tossed it into a metal box. I grabbed my notebook and a calculator. Okay, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and math. Let's assume they are charging market rates. A private room with a bath in this neighborhood. That's easily $120 a night, maybe $150. I punched the numbers. If they rent the master suite every night, that's $1,050 a week. But Jasper, you saw people in the guest room upstairs too, right? Yup, Jasper confirmed, and the pull-out couch downstairs on weekends. So, conservatively, 3 rooms, maybe 4 nights a week at full capacity. The number on the calculator screen stared back at me. 500 asterisk asterisk. $3,500 a month, I asked, horrified. More, Jasper corrected gently. Think weekly, Rowena, if they have 3 groups paying $150 a night. That's $450 a night. Times, say, 4 nights. That's $1,800 a week. That is over asterisk $7,000 a month asterisk. $7,000, tax-free, cash in hand. They were making nearly a 6-figure salary off my property. while I lived on my pension and Social Security, thinking I was burdening them with my grocery bills. They aren't just greedy, I whispered, watching Preston high-five his wife through the gap in the curtains. They are stealing a fortune. But money, I would soon learn, was the least of my problems. It was Thursday evening, when the ground truly fell out from under me. The sun had set and the streetlights were buzzing on. We had just finished a silent dinner of tomato soup. Jasper cleared his throat. It was a heavy, reluctant sound. "Rowena," he said. He wasn't looking at me. He was tracing the pattern on the tablecloth. "There's something else. Something I didn't tell you right away because I wasn't sure if I heard it right, and I didn't want to scare you." My heart stopped. "What is it?" "2 weeks ago," Jasper began, "I was at the Bean and Leaf. You know, that coffee shop on 4th. I nodded. "I saw Brianna there. She wasn't with Preston. She was meeting a man." "A lover?" I asked, almost hopping for it. Infidelity was painful, but it was simple. "No," Jasper said grimly. "Not a lover. He looked like business. Expensive suit, but shiny. Like a lawyer who advertises on the back of a bus, or a doctor who plays golf on Tuesdays." Jasper leaned forward, his old eyes filled with a terrified sorrow. I was at the table behind them. I was reading my paper so they didn't notice me. They were talking low, but Brianna, she has that carrying voice. He took a breath. I heard them talking about documents, about timelines. Timelines for what? "For you, Rowena." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Me." "I heard 3 phrases clearly," Jasper said, counting them off on his fingers. "First was ***, mental competency." The air left the room. Second was ***, medical evaluation. My hands gripped the edge of the table. And the third, Jasper's voice dropped to a whisper, ** nursing home placement. The words hung in the air between us like a poisonous gas. Mental competency, nursing home. "No," I stuttered. "That's impossible. I'm fine. I'm healthy. I do the crossword puzzle in ink every Sunday. I manage my own bills." "It doesn't matter what the truth is, Rowena," Jasper said softly. "It matters what they can prove on paper. They were talking about a rapid decline. They were scripting a narrative." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled napkin. "I wrote down the name I heard her say. She called the man Donovan. And she mentioned a doctor, Dr. Kincaid." I stared at the napkin. The pieces of the puzzle were clicking together, forming a picture so monstrous I couldn't breathe. The changed locks, the gaslighting about the noises, the way they talked over me. They weren't just running a hotel. They were building a case. They were preparing to declare me incompetent so they could take control of the house legally. "I need to make a call," I said, standing up. My legs felt like jelly. "I need to call Octavia." Octavia Reed has been my friend since we took a pottery class together in the 90s. She went to law school in her 40s, a fierce, brilliant woman who specialized in elder law and estate planning. I dialed her number from Jasper's landline, knowing my cell phone might be monitored if Preston was tech-savvy enough. "Rowena," Octavia's voice was warm, professional. "It's late. Is everything all right?" "No, Octavia. I need you to listen to me, and I need you to tell me if I'm crazy." I spilled everything, the illegal rentals, the cash, and then the words Jasper had heard, competency, nursing home. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Octavia spoke again, her warmth was gone. In its place was the cold, sharp steel of a litigator. "Rowena, listen to me very carefully. You are in danger." "What kind of danger?" "The legal kind. It's called conservatorship abuse, and it is far more common than people think," Octavia explained, her voice clipping along rapidly. "If they can get a doctor, a corrupt one or just one they've manipulated, to sign a document stating you have dementia or are incapable of caring for yourself, they can file an emergency petition with the court. But I can defend myself. It happens fast, Rowena, sometimes within 48 hours. If they get temporary guardianship, they gain control of your assets immediately. Your bank accounts, your pension, and your house. They become the legal decision makers. They can place you in a facility for your own safety while they manage your estate. I felt physically sick. Manage my estate, you mean sell it? Or live in it rent-free while you rot in a facility paid for by draining your savings, Octavia said bluntly. If they are already running an illegal business, they are desperate for money. A desperate person with power of attorney is a weapon. I never signed a power of attorney. Are you sure? Have you signed anything recently? Insurance forms? Updated banking details? I racked my brain. A few months ago, Preston had brought me some papers, just for the new insurance policy, Mom, standard stuff. I had signed them without reading the fine print because he is my son. Oh God, I whispered. We need to assume the worst, Octavia said. If Jasper heard them talking about a timeline, they have a date in mind. They are planning a triggering event. A triggering event. A medical episode. A fall. A moment of public confusion. Something to justify calling the ambulance and the social workers. They need a reason to get you in front of a judge. I looked at Jasper. He was watching me with intense worry. Octavia, what do I do? You need evidence, hard evidence, not just suspicions. Do they have paperwork, a ledger? If they are meeting with this Donovan guy, there are contracts. I think so. Find them, Octavia commanded. And Rowena, do not go back into that house until you are ready to drop the hammer. If they suspect you know, they might accelerate their timeline. I hung up the phone and turned to Jasper. The room felt smaller, the air thinner. She says they are planning a triggering event, I told him. They are going to try to make me look crazy. Jasper nodded slowly. He stood up and walked to the window, peering through the lace curtains at my house across the street. It was glowing innocently in the night, a warm beacon of suburban life masking a torture chamber. Friday, Jasper said. What? Remember I told you Friday nights are different. Jasper turned back to me. The traffic is heavier, more guests, but also, that man, the one from the coffee shop. I've seen his car there on Fridays. He pointed a finger at me. If they are planning something, if they are moving to the next stage, it's going to happen this Friday, tomorrow. I looked at the calendar on Jasper's wall. Friday, October 14th. Tomorrow. A cold dread settled into my bones. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about my life, my freedom. If I didn't stop them, by next week I could be in a locked room in a facility named Golden Hope, medicated into oblivion, while Preston and Brianna toasted their success with my wine in my kitchen. We have to watch tomorrow night, I said, my voice shaking but resolute. We have to see exactly what they do. We won't just watch, Jasper said, his eyes hard. We're going to get close. You need those papers Octavia talked about, and I have a feeling I know where they keep them. Where? The backyard, Jasper said. The old potting shed. I've seen Brianna going in there late at night with a flashlight. She doesn't come out with gardening tools, Rowena. She comes out with folders. My potting shed, Arthur's workshop, another sanctuary violated. Tomorrow night, I whispered. Wait until midnight. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Tick-tock, tick-tock. It sounded like a countdown. Friday night arrived with the heavy, humid weight of an impending storm. The air was thick, the kind that makes your skin prickle, mirroring the tension coiling in my stomach. Jasper and I took our posts in the upstairs guest room at sunset. We didn't turn on the lights. We sat in the dark, like gargoyles, watching my home transform into something obscene. If the previous nights had been a trickle of activity, Friday was a flood. At 6:00 p.m., a large SUV pulled up. 4 women, laughing loudly, tumbled out with oversized weekend bags. They looked ready for a bachelorette party. Brianna greeted them with hugs, like a long-lost sister. At 7:15 p.m., another car arrived, a middle-aged couple. At 8:30 p.m., 2 men in business suits arrived by taxi. By 9 o'clock, there were at least 8 strangers in my house. Through the living room window, I could see them mingling. Someone was pouring wine, *my wine, from the bottle Arthur and I were saving for our 40th anniversary. I could hear the muffled bass of music. It wasn't a home anymore, it was a hostel, a party house. "Look at them," I hissed, gripping the binoculars until my knuckles turned white. "They're desecrating it." Preston was bartending. I saw him shaking a cocktail shaker, laughing at something one of the women said. He looked charismatic. He looked like the life of the party. He didn't look like a man plotting to lock his mother away. "Patience, Rowena," Jasper murmured from the armchair next to me. He was holding a thermos of coffee. "The real show hasn't started yet." We waited. The party died down around 11:00 p.m. The lights in the living room dimmed. The bedroom lights upstairs flicked on, then off, one by one. The house fell silent. But we knew better. The grandfather clock in Jasper's hallway chimed midnight. Bong, bong, bong. On the 12th stroke, the back door of my house, the kitchen door leading to the patio, eased open. A figure slipped out. It was Brianna. She wore dark clothes, black jeans, a dark hoodie. She looked around quickly, scanning the yard before stepping into the shadows. A moment later, another figure emerged from the alleyway behind the house. It was a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed entirely in black. He carried a slim, leather briefcase. It was the man from the coffee shop, Donovan. My heart slammed against my ribs. "There he is," I whispered. They didn't speak. Brianna gestured towards the back of the garden, towards the old potting shed Arthur had built with his own hands. She led the way, and Donovan followed, their footsteps silent on the damp grass. They reached the shed. Brianna pulled a key from her pocket and unlocked the padlock Arthur had bought at the hardware store 30 years ago. They slipped inside and closed the door. A faint light flickered on inside, Brianna's flashlight. Through the grimy, cobwebbed window, I could only see shifting shadows. They were in there for 20 minutes. 20 agonizing minutes of imagining what they were plotting in the very space where Arthur used to pot petunias. Finally, the light went out. The door opened. Donovan stepped out, clutching the briefcase tightly to his chest. Brianna locked the shed. They didn't shake hands. Donovan melted back into the alleyway shadows, and Brianna hurried back into the house. It was over. The transaction was complete. "They left something in there," I said, my voice trembling with adrenaline. "They put something in or took something out. I need to know what it is." "Tomorrow," Jasper said firmly. "We go in tomorrow." Saturday morning dawned gray and foggy. The air smelled of wet earth. From our lookout, we watched the exodus. The guests left in waves between 7:00 and 9:00 a.m. Brianna was busy in the kitchen, churning out breakfast like a short-order cook. At 9:30 a.m., Preston left. He got into his car, wearing his weekend work clothes, jeans, and a polo shirt. He was probably going to the bank to deposit the cash or to Home Depot to buy more supplies for his illegal hotel. Brianna was alone with the last two straggling guests. "Now," Jasper said, "it's now or never." My heart was in my throat. We exited Jasper's house through the back door and crept down the alleyway that ran behind our properties. The fog provided perfect cover. We reached the back gate of my garden. The wood was damp and slick under my fingers. I reached through the gap and lifted the latch, praying the hinges wouldn't squeak. They groaned softly, a sound that seemed deafening in the quiet morning. We froze. We listened. Nothing but the distant sound of a lawnmower. We slipped inside. I was an intruder in my own backyard. The garden I knew by heart felt alien. The rhododendrons seemed to loom like sentinels. Every crunch of gravel under my sneaker sounded like a gunshot. We reached the shed. The padlock was there, rusted and familiar. I fumbled in my pocket for my keychain. My hands were shaking so violently I dropped them once, the keys jingling against a stepping stone. "SHH," Jasper hissed, his eyes wide. I snatched them up and found the small brass key. I slid it into the lock. It turned with a stiff asterisk click asterisk. I pulled the hasp free and opened the door. The smell hit me first. It was the smell of Arthur, dust, dried peat moss, old terracotta pots, and faintly engine oil. It was a smell of comfort, now tainted with danger. We stepped inside and closed the door, plunging ourselves into gloom illuminated only by the dusty light filtering through the dirty window. The shed was cluttered with gardening tools, stacks of plastic pots, bags of fertilizer. It looked normal. But then Jasper pointed. There. On Arthur's old workbench, shoved behind a stack of dusty seed catalogs, was a gray metal lockbox. It wasn't antique. It was modern, heavy-duty. I approached it. There was no keyhole, just a digital keypad. "Damn it," I whispered. "It's locked." Jasper stepped forward. He didn't look at the keypad. He looked at the side of the box where the hinges were. "These cheap ones," he murmured, pulling a screwdriver from a rack on the wall. "The pins are usually exposed." With a practiced hand, he wedged the screwdriver head under the hinge pin and tapped it with the palm of his hand. The pin popped out. He did the same to the other side. He lifted the lid from the back. I gasped. The box was stuffed with money. Stacks of 20s, 50s, and 100s banded together with rubber bands. It was more cash than I had ever seen in one place outside of a bank movie. 10,000 at least, Jasper estimated grimly. But the money was just the cushion. Underneath the cash lay a manila folder. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I lifted it out. The label on the folder was handwritten in Brianna's neat script. Project Sanctuary. The irony made me want to vomit. I opened the folder. The first document was a printed email, a rental agreement with an online booking platform. It listed my address. The host was listed as ***, Preston Sterling, owner. "He's posing as the owner," I murmured. The next documents were terrifying. They were blank medical evaluation forms on official letterhead from a clinic I didn't recognize. They were pre-filled with my name, Rowena Sterling, DOB 4121959. The diagnosis section was blank, but notes were scribbled in the margins in Brianna's handwriting. Check for sundowning, memory lapses, agitation. Then a glossy brochure for Golden Hope Senior Living. A quote was stapled to the front. "Memory care unit, private room, $6,500 month." A sticky note attached read, "Donovan says we can use the house income to cover this once POAs are signed." POA, power of attorney, the weapon Octavia warned me about. But the final document was the one that made my blood run cold. It was a single sheet of notebook paper, torn from a spiral pad. It was a handwritten timeline. Friday, Oct 14 tonight. Finalize paperwork with Donovan. Get cash drop. Tuesday, Oct 18. * Rowena returns from Boston. Wednesday, Oct 19. * Brianna suggests the free checkup. Friday, Oct 21. * appointment with Dr. Harrison Kincaid ***. Note from Harrison, he will administer mild sedative, lorazepam, in her orange juice at breakfast. By 10 a.m. apt, she will be confused, lethargic. Easy to get signature on the temporary guardianship form. Weekend of Oct 22. * file emergency petition with court. Move her to Golden Hope Monday morning. I stared at the paper, the words blurred. Sedative in her orange juice. They weren't just going to lie to a doctor. They were going to drug me. They were going to poison me in my own kitchen at the table where I fed them dinner to make me compliant, to make me look crazy. This wasn't just greed. This was assault. This was a calculated, cold-blooded plan to erase me. "Oh my God," I breathed, clutching the counter for support. "Preston knows about this. He agreed to this." "Rowena," Jasper said urgently, looking out the grimy window. "We need to go now." I snapped back to reality. I pulled out my smartphone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it, but I managed to open the camera app. I took pictures of everything. The cash, the rental agreement, the medical forms, the brochure, and especially the handwritten timeline. Every single word. We shoved everything back into the box, replaced the lid, and hammered the hinge pins back in as best we could. We fled. We ran out of the shed, locked the padlock, and scrambled back through the wet garden to the alleyway gate. We didn't stop running until we were back inside Jasper's kitchen, doors locked, breathless and trembling. I slumped into a chair. The phone clutched to my chest like a lifeline. I looked at Jasper. His face was pale, his eyes wide with the same horror I felt. I wasn't just a mother whose son wanted her house. I was the target of a conspiracy. My son and his wife were dangerous criminals, and I was living in their crosshairs. Sunday morning didn't feel like a holy day. It felt like the morning before a battle. Jasper drove me into the city to Octavia Reed's office. It was located in a brick building that smelled of old books and floor wax, a scent that instantly made me feel steadier. Octavia was waiting for us in a conference room with a view of the skyline. Sitting next to her was a man with a gentle, serious face and a stamp in his hand. "Rowena, this is Tobias Clark," Octavia said. "He's a notary public. He's here to make sure everything we do today is ironclad." Tobias nodded respectfully. "Mrs. Sterling, I'm here to witness your signature and verify your identity. Nothing gets past me." On the mahogany table lay a stack of documents. They looked like ordinary paper, but to me, they were armor. They were shields and swords forged in ink. "We are going to build a fortress around you, Rowena," Octavia said, sliding the first document toward me. "This is a *** revocation of power of attorney ***. If you ever signed anything, accidentally or otherwise, giving Preston authority, this kills it. It is effective immediately." I signed. The pen scratched loudly in the quiet room. Tobias stamped it. Thump. "Next," Octavia said, "is a ** declaration of mental competency ***. I have attached the affidavit from your actual physician, Dr. Evans, whom I called yesterday. He confirmed your clean bill of health from your physical 2 months ago. This document states clearly that you are of sound mind and capable of managing your own affairs. It preemptively blocks any emergency petition they try to file." I signed. Thump. "And finally," Octavia's voice softened slightly, losing its professional edge for just a moment, "the last will and testament ***. She slid the thickest document toward me. "This removes Preston Sterling as your primary beneficiary. It explicitly states that he is disinherited due to conduct against the estate. It leaves the house and your assets to a charitable trust with a stipend for your sister Margaret." I looked at the line where my son's name used to be. For a second, my hand hovered. I remembered the little boy who used to bring me dandelions. I remembered the teenager who promised he'd always take care of me. Then I remembered the timeline in the shed. Sedative in orange juice. Induced confusion. That little boy was dead. The man who replaced him was a predator. I signed my name with a flourish. Thump. "It's done," Octavia said, gathering the papers into a folder. "Legally, you are untouchable, but physically, you are still vulnerable until we spring the trap." "I know what I have to do," I said, my voice cold. "I have to go back." "You have to be an Oscar-winning actress, Rowena," Octavia warned. "You have to walk into that house, let them hug you, and pretend you are the same trusting, naive mother they think they can exploit. You have to lull them into a false sense of security so they don't cancel the appointment on Friday. We need to catch them in the act of the attempt." "I can do it," I said, and I meant it. My fear had burned away in the shed. All that was left was a diamond-hard determination. I returned to 43 Maple Street on Monday evening. I made Jasper drop me off a block away so I could walk up the driveway as if a taxi had just left. I dragged my suitcase behind me, the wheels rumbling on the pavement like a drum roll. The house looked innocent. The porch light was on. The hydrangeas were still blooming, but as I stepped onto the porch, I smelled it. Bleach. It was faint, masked by the scent of lavender air freshener, but it was there. The sharp, chemical tang of industrial cleaning. I took a deep breath, plastered a smile on my face, and rang the doorbell. "Mom." Preston opened the door. His face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions, shock, panic, and finally, a forced, stretched delight. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "I know." I dropped my suitcase and opened my arms. "I just missed home so much. And Margaret's cat is allergic to me, I think. I spent the whole time sneezing. Preston hugged me. His body was stiff, tense. Over his shoulder, I saw Brianna appear in the hallway. Her eyes darted around the room, checking for, what? Stray luggage, a guest who hadn't left yet. Rowena, Brianna cried, rushing forward to join the hug. Welcome back. Oh, look at you, you look rested. I feel wonderful, I lied. I pulled back and looked at them. And look at the house, it looks spotless. You two took such good care of it. We tried, Brianna said, her smile twitching slightly. We did a deep clean yesterday, just to freshen things up for your return. You did a deep clean to wash away the DNA of 20 strangers, I thought. Well, it smells lovely, I said, like lemons and hard work. I watched panic flare in Brianna's eyes for a nanosecond before she suppressed it. Yes, exactly. Come sit, I'll make tea. We sat in the living room. I told them invented stories about lobster rolls in Boston and walks along the harbor. I watched them relax. Their shoulders dropped. They exchanged covert glances of relief. The old lady was back, clueless and happy. The ATM was operational again. That night, I went to my room, the upstairs guest room, but I didn't sleep. Around 11:30 p.m., I heard the familiar murmur of voices from their bedroom down the hall. I slipped out of bed. I didn't wear slippers, socks were quieter. I crept down the hallway, pressing my back against the wall, inching closer to their door, which was cracked open a fraction of an inch. She doesn't suspect a thing, Preston's voice was saying. He sounded relieved, but also exhausted. She's talking about lobster rolls, Bri. She has no clue. Good, Brianna's voice was sharper, colder. That makes Friday easier. Are we still doing it? I mean, she seems fine. Maybe we can wait. Wait for what, Preston? For the bank to foreclose on us? For your credit card debt to bury us? Brianna snapped. We have the appointment. Dr. Kincaid is expecting us. The paperwork is ready. We stick to the timeline. But the juice, Preston hesitated. Is it safe? Lorazepam on an empty stomach. My heart hammered against my ribs. There it is, the confession. Harrison said it's mild. Brianna dismissed him. She'll just get groggy, confused. By the time we get to the clinic, she won't know what she's signing. She'll think it's a standard intake form. Once we have the temporary guardianship, we can move her to Golden Hope over the weekend. In the house. The house becomes ours completely. We can ramp up the rentals, no more hiding. We can double the income. Okay, Preston sighed, a sound of surrender. Okay, let's just get it over with. I backed away slowly, step by silent step, until I was safe in my room. I sat on the edge of the bed, trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer horror of looking into the abyss of people you loved. They weren't stopping. Even seeing me happy and healthy wasn't enough to prick their conscience. They were going to drug me on Friday morning. Friday, I whispered to the dark. You're waiting for Friday, but you won't make it that far. Tuesday and Wednesday were a masterclass in deception. I played the part of the doting, slightly frail grandmother perfectly. I asked Brianna to help me open a jar of pickles because my hands felt weak. I complained about forgetting where I put my glasses. I fed their narrative. I gave them the ammunition they thought they needed. On Wednesday morning, over breakfast, Brianna baited the hook. She was pouring coffee, looking the picture of domestic innocence. Rowena, she started casually. Preston and I were talking, since you mentioned feeling a bit tired lately and with the memory stuff. Oh, it's just age, dear, I said, buttering my toast. I know, but there's this wonderful doctor, a friend of a friend, Dr. Kincaid. He specializes in preventative care for seniors. He's doing free checkups this week. Free? I asked, widening my eyes. Well, that's rare. Exactly, and since we care about you so much, I went ahead and booked a slot for Friday morning at 10:00 a.m. I thought I could drive you. She looked at me with those wide, lying eyes. I took a sip of coffee to hide my smile. She had just walked right into the cage. That is so thoughtful of you, Brianna, I said warmly. Friday works perfectly. I'd love to go. She exhaled, a breath of pure victory. Great, I'll put it in the calendar. They thought they had won. They thought the trap was closing around me. They didn't realize they were the ones standing on the trapdoor. Thursday arrived. The air in the house was electric with anticipation. For them, it was anticipation of the final step in their master plan. For me, it was the countdown to justice. At 4:00 p.m., while Preston was at work and Brianna was in the shower, I sent a text message to Octavia. The appointment is confirmed for Friday. They are expecting guests tonight. Is the team ready? The reply came 2 minutes later. Inspector Kowalski is briefed. Police escort is on standby. 9:00 p.m. tonight, be in your room. I deleted the messages. By 6:00 p.m., the house began to transform again. Preston arrived home early, carrying bags of ice and snacks. Brianna was putting fresh flowers, my gardenias, in the guest rooms. We have a few friends coming over for a game night tonight, Mom, Preston told me, avoiding eye contact. It might get a little loud. Maybe you'd be more comfortable in your room. Oh, of course, I said, playing the compliant old woman. I have a new book to read anyway. I'll just tuck myself in early. Perfect, Brianna said. Sleep tight. I went upstairs to my room and closed the door, but I didn't get in bed. I sat in the chair by the window, watching the street. At 7:00 p.m., the first car arrived, a group of 3. At 7:30 p.m., a solo traveler. At 8:00 p.m., a young couple with backpacks. By 8:45 p.m., there were 7 strangers in my house. I could hear music thumping softly from downstairs. I could hear the clinking of glasses. They were celebrating early. I looked at my watch, 8:55 p.m. I stood up and smoothed my skirt. I walked to the mirror and looked at myself. I didn't see a victim. I saw the lady of the house. Outside, a municipal vehicle turned onto the street, its yellow lights flashing silently. Behind it was a police cruiser. The trap was sprung. At 8:45 p.m. on Thursday, 43 Maple Street sounded less like a home and more like a hostel during happy hour. From my position at the top of the stairs, hidden in the shadows of the landing, I could hear the distinct, chaotic hum of an unauthorized business in full swing. There was the clinking of glass from the living room. Someone, a man with a booming laugh, was telling a story about a fishing trip in Key West. A woman was asking where the extra towels were kept. Below me, Preston was playing the role of the affable innkeeper. Oh, the towels are just in the hallway closet, second shelf, I heard him say, his voice smooth and eager to please. And please, help yourself to the wine. It's a house blend. My asterisk wine, my asterisk towels, my asterisk hallway. Brianna was darting between the kitchen and the living room, carrying a tray of snacks. I could picture her, that tight, hostess smile plastered on her face, calculating the nightly yield in her head. They were relaxed. They were confident. They thought the old lady was asleep upstairs, dreaming of knitting needles, blissfully unaware that she was scheduled for a chemical lobotomy the next morning. They had no idea that the old lady was currently checking her watch, counting down the seconds to their destruction. Asterisk 8:58 p.m. 8:59 p.m. Asterisk 9:00 p.m. The doorbell didn't just ring, it demanded attention. It was followed immediately by a heavy, authoritative knock. Thud, thud, thud. The laughter in the living room died instantly. I'll get it, Preston called out, sounding confused. Probably just a pizza delivery for the guys in room 2. I leaned forward, peering through the banister rails. Preston opened the front door. He didn't find a pizza boy. Standing on the porch was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. He wore a navy blue municipal windbreaker with the city seal embroidered on the chest, holding a clipboard like a weapon. Behind him stood a uniformed police officer, hands resting casually on his belt. Good evening, the man said. His voice carried all the way upstairs. I am Inspector Kowalski from the Department of Housing and Code Enforcement. Preston froze. His smile faltered, twitching at the corners. Good evening, Inspector. Is there a problem? We didn't call anyone. We received a formal complaint regarding the operation of an unlicensed commercial lodging establishment at this address, Kowalski said, stepping into the foyer without waiting for an invitation. The police officer followed, closing the door behind them. I have an administrative warrant to inspect the premises. Whoa, wait a minute, Preston stammered, backing up. There must be a mistake. This is a private residence. It's just family. We have family visiting. Kowalski didn't blink. He looked past Preston into the living room, where 7 strangers were staring back at him, wine glasses frozen in midair. That's a lot of family, Kowalski noted dryly. He walked straight into the living room. Brianna appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her face went pale as a sheet when she saw the uniforms. Preston, what's going on? Inspector, Preston tried to regain control, puffing out his chest. You can't just barge in here. I know my rights. These people are our personal guests. Kowalski ignored him. He approached the young couple on the sofa. Good evening. Are you related to Mr. Sterling? The young man looked terrified. No, sir. How do you know him? I don't, the man admitted, putting his drink down. We booked the room on the app. It was listed as Cozy Craftsman Retreat. We paid $145 for the night. Preston closed his eyes. The lie had evaporated in 10 seconds. Kowalski turned to his assistant, who I hadn't noticed before, snapping photos. Document that. Unlicensed transaction. Now wait, Brianna shrieked, her voice climbing an octave. You don't understand, we accept donations for expenses. Ma'am, the law is clear, Kowalski said, pulling out a measuring tape. He walked toward the hallway. Operating a lodging facility without a certificate of occupancy, fire safety inspection, or sanitation permit is a Class B violation. Let's see the rooms. The next 20 minutes were a slow-motion car crash. Kowalski moved through the house with surgical precision. Bedroom 1, occupied by 3 non-residents, no fire extinguisher visible. Click, click. Bedroom 2, occupied by single male, door lacks interior deadbolt required for rental units. Click, click. Kitchen, evidence of commercial food preparation without a license. Click, click. Preston was following him like a lost puppy, sweating profusely. Inspector, please, we can explain. We're just trying to make ends meet. My mother. She's sick. The medical bills are piling up. I gripped the banister. How dare he? Using the mother he planned to drug as his excuse. Kowalski stopped in front of the locked master bedroom door. Open it. I don't have the key on me, Preston lied. Open it, Mr. Sterling, or the officer will remove the door, Kowalski said calmly. Preston fumbled in his pocket, produced the key, and opened the door. Inside, the 3 women on the girls' trip shrieked as the light flipped on. Suitcases were exploded everywhere. Illegal conversion of a single-family dwelling, Kowalski muttered, writing on his clipboard. He turned to Preston. Mr. Sterling, the fines for tonight alone are going to exceed $10,000, and that's before the tax evasion investigation. Tax evasion, Brianna whispered, leaning against the wall for support. This property is registered to a Rowena Sterling, Kowalski said, looking at his paperwork. Does she reside here? She's asleep, Brianna stammered. She's elderly, she doesn't know about the details. Please don't wake her, she gets confused. It was time. I opened my bedroom door. I stepped out onto the landing. I wasn't wearing my nightgown. I was wearing my best Sunday suit, a sharp navy blazer and tailored trousers. I had applied lipstick. I stood tall, my spine steel. I am not confused, Brianna, I said clearly. Every head in the house snapped upward. Preston looked like he had seen a ghost. Mom. I walked down the stairs slowly, one step at a time, the sound of my heels echoing in the silence. I didn't look at my son. I walked straight to the inspector. Good evening, Inspector Kowalski, I said, extending my hand. I am Rowena Sterling. I am the sole legal owner of this property. Kowalski shook my hand respectfully. Mrs. Sterling, are you aware that a commercial lodging business is being operated in your home? I turned slowly to face Preston and Brianna. They were huddled together, trembling. No, Inspector, I said, my voice cold and steady. I did not authorize this. In fact, I was told these rooms were closed off for repairs. My son and daughter-in-law have been operating this business behind my back without my consent. Mom, please, Preston whispered, tears welling in his eyes. That changes things, Kowalski said grimly. That moves this from a code violation to fraud. He turned to the room full of guests. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an illegal operation. The police are shutting it down immediately. You have 20 minutes to gather your belongings and vacate the premises. Chaos erupted. The guests began shouting. I want a refund. Where are we supposed to go? This is ridiculous. Take it up with the people who took your money, Kowalski said, pointing at Brianna. For the next half hour, my living room was a scene of humiliation. Brianna was forced to open her purse and hand back cash, bill by bill, to the angry strangers. She was sobbing, her mascara running down her face. Preston stood in the corner, staring at the floor, unable to move. Finally, the last guest dragged their suitcase out the front door. The police officer stood on the porch to ensure they left. Kowalski handed me a carbon copy of the report. You'll need a lawyer, Mrs. Sterling, he said gently. I have one, I replied. Thank you, Inspector. When the door closed, the silence that fell over the house was heavier than the noise had been. It was the silence of a bomb crater. I stood in the center of the living room. The floor was scuffed. There were empty wine glasses on the coffee table. Preston sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. Brianna was wiping her eyes, her breathing jagged. Rowena, Brianna started, her voice shaking. I know this looks bad, but you have to listen. We had no choice. I looked at her. No choice. The debts, she pleaded, walking toward me. Preston has credit card debt, $30,000. We were drowning. We were going to lose our apartment, that's why we moved in. We just needed to get back on our feet. We were doing it for the family. For the family, I repeated quietly. Yes, we were going to tell you. Once we had enough saved up, we were going to surprise you with a renovation or a trip. Liar, I said. The word cracked like a whip. Mom, it's the truth, Preston cried, looking up. We just wanted to help. You wanted to help? I walked to the coffee table and picked up a coaster, turning it over in my hands. Is that why you have an appointment with Dr. Harrison Kincaid tomorrow morning at 10:00 a.m.? The color drained from both of their faces, so fast it looked painful. Is that why? I continued, my voice rising. You have a sedative ready to put in my orange juice. Brianna gasped, a strangled sound. She took a step back, hitting the wall. How, Preston choked out, how do you? Because I wasn't in Boston, Preston, I shouted, finally releasing the fury I had held in for days. I was across the street. I was in Jasper's window watching every single person you let into my home. I saw the cash. I saw the parties. I took a step toward them, and for the first time in his life, my son looked afraid of me. And I saw the shed, I hissed. Brianna let out a sob. I saw the box, Brianna. I saw the folder labeled Project Sanctuary. I saw the fake medical forms. I saw the brochure for Golden Hope. I read the note about induced confusion. I threw the coaster onto the table. It clattered loudly. You weren't doing this for debt, I said, my voice trembling with disgust. You were planning to drug me. You were planning to declare me incompetent. You were going to lock me in a cage so you could turn my life's work into a cash cow. It wasn't like that, Preston begged, falling to his knees. He actually fell to his knees. Mom, please, it was just an idea. We never would have gone through with it. We love you. Love, I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. You don't drug people you love, Preston. You don't steal their lives. I looked at him kneeling on the rug his father had bought, weeping like a child, and I felt something inside me break. It wasn't my heart. My heart had broken days ago. It was the tether, the invisible cord that connects a mother to her child. It snapped. "Get up," I said coldly. He looked at me, snot running down his nose. "Mom." I said get up. He stood, swaying. "You have until noon tomorrow," I said. "I want you out. Everything. Your clothes, your boxes, your lies. If you are not gone by 12:00 p.m., I am calling the police back, and this time I will file criminal charges for elder abuse and conspiracy." "Where will we go?" Brianna whispered. "We have no money. We gave it all back to the guests." "You have the $10,000 in the box in the shed," I said. "Take it. Use it for a deposit on an apartment or a lawyer. You're going to need one." Brianna's eyes narrowed. The sadness vanished, replaced by a flash of the venom I had seen in the shed. "You can't just kick us out. We have rights. We're tenants." "You are not tenants," I countered. "And if you try to fight me, Brianna, I will destroy you." I pulled a folded paper from my blazer pocket. "My lawyer, Octavia Reed, has already filed a revocation of power of attorney. She has a signed affidavit of my mental competency. And as of yesterday..." I looked Preston in the eye. "I have signed a new will. You are disinherited, Preston. You get nothing. Not this house. Not a dime. You traded your inheritance for a few months of illegal rent." Preston looked like he had been shot. You disinherited me." "You disinherited yourself," I said. I turned my back on them. "Go to your room, pack, do not speak to me." I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and drank it with a steady hand. Behind me, I heard the sounds of defeat, the heavy, dragging footsteps of two people who had gambled everything on their cruelty and lost. I walked back to the living room window and looked out at the street. Jasper's porch light flickered once. I flicked the living room lamp off and on. Signal received. I was shaken. I was alone in a house that felt tainted. But as I looked at my reflection in the dark window, I stood tall. The sanctuary was broken, yes, but the queen was still standing. Friday morning didn't arrive with a bang. It arrived with the hollow scraping of plastic wheels on hardwood floors. I sat in my armchair in the living room, a mug of coffee growing cold in my hands. I watched them. Preston and Brianna moved like ghosts, their eyes fixed on the floor, dragging 4 large suitcases toward the front door. They didn't speak to each other. The united front of the perfect couple had shattered overnight. Brianna's face was puffy, her makeup absent. Preston looked 10 years older, his shoulders slumped under the weight of a shame I hoped was heavy enough to crush him. At the door, Preston paused. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his house key, the brass key with the blue rubber cover I had given him when he moved in. He placed it on the entryway console table. It made a sharp asterisk clack against the wood. Brianna did the same. Preston turned to me. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the house, then at me, and I saw the realization hit him. He had gambled a kingdom for pocket change, and he had lost everything. "Goodbye," I said. It wasn't a question. It was a period at the end of a sentence. He nodded once, jerky and stiff, and walked out. I heard the car doors slam. I heard the engine start. I heard the tires crunch on the gravel, then the whine of the engine as they accelerated down the street. And then silence. It wasn't the peaceful silence of a library. It was the ringing silence of a battlefield after the cannons stopped firing. The house felt enormous. It felt empty, but for the first time in months, the air felt mine. I stood up and walked to the console table. I picked up the keys. They were cold. I dropped them into the trash can in the kitchen. Then I sat on the floor and wept. Around noon, a soft knock came at the back door. It was Jasper. He was holding a covered Pyrex dish wrapped in a checkered towel. "Turkey chili," he said gently through the screen door. "Thought you might not feel like cooking." He came in and set the food on the table. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask if they were gone. He just pulled out a chair and sat with me while I stared at the wall. "You did the right thing, Rowena," he said after a long time. "The hard thing, but the right thing." "Then why does it feel like I'm the one who died?" I asked, my voice cracking. "I won, Jasper. I saved my house. I saved my life, but I lost my son." Jasper reached across the table and covered my hand with his. His skin was paper-thin, warm and dry. You didn't lose him today, Ro. You lost him a long time ago. Today was just the funeral. He was right. That didn't make it hurt less, but it made the pain make sense. We need to change the energy in here, Jasper said, standing up with a grunt. This house smells like bleach and bad intentions. We spent the weekend reclaiming my sanctuary. It started with the moisture room. I unlocked the door. The air inside was stale, smelling of strangers' cologne and cheap wine. Get the trash bags, I ordered. I stripped the bed. The sheets, the duvet cover, the pillows, everything that the strangers had touched, everything Brianna had washed with such mechanical efficiency, I shoved into black heavy-duty bags. I didn't care if they were high thread count. I didn't care if they were new. They were tainted. We dragged the bags to the curb. Then I opened every window in the house. I let the autumn breeze, crisp and smelling of dry leaves, sweep through the hallways. I scrubbed the floors with lavender oil. I rearranged the furniture in the living room so that the sofa no longer faced the TV, but the garden. By Sunday night, my muscles ached, but the house felt lighter. It felt like my asterisk lungs were filling with air again. 2 weeks later, I sat in Octavia's office. The view of the city was the same, but the documents on the table were different. The medical board has formally suspended Dr. Harrison Kincaid's license, Octavia said, sliding a letter across the desk. They've opened a criminal investigation into his practice. Apparently, you weren't the only senior he was helping to sedate for signatures. He's going to prison, Rowena. I nodded, feeling a grim satisfaction. Good, he swore an oath to do no harm. Now, Octavia said, leaning forward, we need to talk about Preston and Brianna. She opened a file. The district attorney is interested. Based on the evidence you found in the shed, the timeline, the intent to use a controlled substance, the fraud, they have enough to charge them with conspiracy to commit elder abuse and attempted grand larceny. She paused. If we proceed, they are looking at 3 to 5 years in state prison. Brianna likely more, as she was the architect. Preston, maybe less if he flips on her, but they will both do time. The room went quiet. I looked out the window at the steel and glass skyscrapers. I thought about the little boy who used to run to me when he scraped his knee. I thought about the man who stood in my kitchen and agreed to drug my orange juice. I held the power of God in my hands. I could crush them. I could send my only child to a cell. Justice says yes, Octavia murmured, but I need to know what you asterisk say. I closed my eyes. If I sent him to prison, I would be tied to him forever through court dates, parole hearings, and the eternal guilt of a mother who caged her child. No, I said softly. Octavia raised an eyebrow. Rowena, they were going to. I know what they were going to do, I interrupted, and they will have to live with that. Preston will have to wake up every morning for the rest of his life knowing he tried to destroy the only person who unconditionally loved him. That is a prison, Octavia, a prison of the mind. I stood up. I won't file criminal charges, but I want a restraining order, permanent. I want him to know that while I am not sending him to jail, I am removing him from my life. He is exiled. Octavia nodded slowly. Mercy, it's a powerful choice. It's not mercy, I said. It's freedom for me. A month later, a letter arrived. It had no return address, but I recognized the handwriting. It was shaky, jagged. I sat on my back porch, wrapped in a knitted shawl, and opened it. Mom asterisk. I know I don't have the right to call you that anymore. I know you probably won't read this. Brianna and I are done. She went back to her parents in Ohio. She blames me for ruining the plan. I blame myself for ever listening to her. I'm living in a studio apartment in the East End. I got a job with a construction crew. It's hard work. My hands are blistered, but it feels honest. For the first time in years, I'm earning money with sweat, not schemes. I'm not writing to ask for money or forgiveness. I know I don't deserve either. I just wanted you to know that I wake up every night sweating, seeing you standing on the stairs. I hear your voice saying, I know. I loved you. I love you. Somewhere along the way, I let greed eat the part of me that was your son. I am trying to find him again. Please take care of the house. Take care of yourself. Preston asterisk. I read the letter twice. My vision blurred with tears, hot, stinging tears. Part of me wanted to call him, to tell him I was proud he was working, to tell him to come home for dinner. But I looked at the garden. The frost was settling on the grass. The season had changed. I folded the letter and put it in the pocket of my cardigan. I didn't throw it away. I would keep it. But I wouldn't answer. Not today, maybe not ever. Healing required distance, and my wounds were still too fresh. 6 months later. The light in the downstairs room is magnificent in the morning. I had the walls painted a soft, buttery yellow, the color of optimism. The bed is gone. In its place stands a large easel, a drafting table, and shelves lined with tubes of acrylic paint. The room that was once a storage unit for memories, and then a den of betrayal, is now my art studio. I stood before the canvas, a brush in my hand. I was painting the view from Jasper's window, the way my house looked from the outside. But in my painting, the house wasn't dark or ominous. It was bright, surrounded by an aura of gold. Needs more blue in the sky, a voice said from the doorway. I smiled and turned. Jasper was leaning against the doorframe, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Everyone's a critic, I teased. Just an observation from your muse, he winked. We sat in the studio, sipping coffee. Octavia is coming for dinner tonight, I said. She's bringing that wine she likes. The expensive stuff, Jasper grinned. I'll wear my good flannel. I looked at him, my friend, my ally. I looked around the room I had reclaimed. My life was different now. It was smaller in terms of family, but bigger in terms of peace. I walked with a lighter step. I had installed a security system, yes, but I no longer checked the locks out of fear. I checked them out of ownership. That evening, as I prepared for bed, I stopped in front of the hallway mirror. I looked at the woman staring back. I saw the lines around her eyes, etchings of grief. I saw the gray in her hair. But I also saw a set to her jaw that hadn't been there a year ago. I saw a survivor. For so long, I had defined myself by who I loved, Arthur's wife, Preston's mother. I had opened my doors and my heart so wide that I let the wolves in, thinking they were sheep because they shared my blood. I touched the glass of the mirror, tracing my own reflection. You did good, Rowena, I whispered. I realized then that love is a beautiful thing, but without boundaries, it is a vulnerability. Love can be a disguise for those who wish to take from you. But self-love, the refusal to be diminished, that is the shield. That is the armor that never rusts. I turned off the light. I climbed into my bed in my house under my roof. I was alone, and I was entirely, wonderfully free.